Welcome back to Power and Politics. Public hearings on the Northern Gateway Pipeline kicked off yesterday, but not before the Natural Resources Minister, Joe Oliver, delivered what many saw as a preemptive strike against the project's opponents. He issued a scathing open letter warning that, quote, foreign-funded radicals were trying to hijack the pipeline review process. Whose agenda are the First Nations and environmental groups serving? Are the multinationals behind the pipeline more Canadian than the critics? Who should be able to be at the hearing? How long should it go on for? Let's find out. What is a radical anyway? In Toronto, John Bennett is the executive director of the Sierra Club. He wrote a letter to Joe Oliver. And Catherine Marshall does public relations for Ethical Oil. She's here as well. Thanks so much for being here, both of you.
Thanks for having me on.
Mr. Bennett, let me start with you. What did you think of Joe Oliver's letter calling environmental groups, essentially who are opposed to this, radicals, and saying, quote, foreign money is being used to really overload the public consultation process?
Well, I assumed that the Conservative government got bored not having any new political opponents to beat up on, so they decided to take on the environmentalists. Clearly, this is about trying to reduce the credibility of the environmental movement in Canada, because we're an effective voice for speaking out for a sustainable future for Canadians, and because so many of us actually got involved and said we want to participate, we want to be heard. I would have thought that ministers, especially Conservative ministers, would have said, wow, this is terrific. 4,200 people want to be involved in a public debate.
Well, he says he told me, and he said in his letter, there are actually foreign-backed groups, and they're stacking the process to delay it so long it becomes no longer economically viable. And he even said, most of the groups, they oppose any form of mining, any form of forestry, any form of hydroelectric. Where do you stand on that characterization?
Well, they're talking about building a pipeline through the last remaining intact temperate rainforest on Earth. And because it's the last place on Earth of this ecosystem, everyone on Earth has an interest in it. So there are no foreigners in terms of the environment.
But John, this is a Canadian decision. This is a decision that affects the interests of Canadian people, and we should keep it a Canadian process. And foreign interests in their deep pockets should not be hijacking that process.
That's a bunch of garbage. You're just trying to smear us for no reason. Like, why don't you talk about the issues? Talk about whether or not we should be pumping oil out of the ground so that we can create climate change, that we should be risking this temperate rainforest. That's what's at issue here, not where the support's coming from.
Okay, Catherine Marshall, what's your case? Why do you agree with the minister when he said somehow we should ban foreign special interest groups who are undermining Canada's national economic interest? What do you make of that?
Well, Minister Oliver's letter was bang on. This is becoming a battle between reasonable, everyday, hardworking Canadians and foreign special interests in their deep pockets and their puppet groups who are trying to hijack and gum up a Canadian process. And if we're talking about smearing, let's talk about the comments made by John yesterday, where you, in an interview, compared Canada's oil sands industry to cancer, or to heroin.
Absolutely. You want to do it again?
That is an insult to the hundreds of thousands of Canadians who work to make ethical oil
across
the country each year. You should
hang on.
apologize to these Canadians.
I understand that you two have fundamental disagreements, but let me just try to clarify something. Catherine Marshall, if you want environmental groups that get money, and some of them do from outside of Canadian borders, other interveners, America's ExxonMobil, Britain's BP, France's Total E&P, China's Sino-Canada, Petroleum Corp, Japan Canada Oil Sands Limited, they've all asked for intervener status at the hearings. All of them are foreign. South Korean conglomerate Daewoo. So this is what I don't understand here. Why can the oil companies who are foreign-owned intervene and have their piece? And why can't environmental groups, which may have some support from outside of Canada, why should they be banned?
Look, I mean, it's very simple. This is about foreign special interests and foreign groups and foreigners and the groups that they fund who are not part of this decision. They don't have a stake. They don't care about our economy and our jobs and the future of our energy development. In many cases, they want to shut down our energy development. I mean, that is radical. That is extreme, and they're trying to hijack this process.
But this is the question, if you're talking about finance, and let me ask, I mean, ethical oil, some people wonder where you get your funding from. For example, some have said that Enbridge, which is building the pipeline, is a funder of ethical oil, and that they're using your group to disempower environmental groups that oppose this. So I'll ask you, since we're talking about funding, does Enbridge support or give your organization money?
Look, we're a small grassroots advocacy organization, and this is about foreign special interests and their puppet groups who are trying to hijack a Canadian process.
Okay, but
John,
are you? But
no, I have
just
a
a second.
question for John.
Catherine Marshall, just answer the question.
This isn't about our money. This is about foreign special interests who are trying to hijack the process.
But
Evan.
I've asked you a question. You've accused environmental groups of being puppet groups. So let's ask: are
and we
you
don't take
receiving
any foreign money
from?
We take no foreign money. Absolutely, we're 100% Canadian.
That wasn't my question.
We are 100%
Are you
Canadian.
taking money from Enbridge?
We don't, I mean, we're a small grassroots organization. Our average donor is a regular, hardworking Canadian who gives us $20, $30 through our website.
I have no problem. I'm not trying to disparage
Evan, look,
your donors. I'm trying to
Evan.
understand if the company that is building the pipeline is also funding you. If we're talking about who's funding and the influence it has, I think it's fair to be transparent
This is about foreign
that.
influence, and ethicaloil.org is 100% Canadian. Let's talk about foreign money. John, would you take foreign money from any country? Is there any country you would refuse to take foreign funding from? And do you really think that your foreign special interest funders know what's better for Canadians more than Canadians do?
Well, I actually put it this way, that no one's ever told the Sierra Club from any other country or any other entity what are the important issues in terms of the Canadian environment and the global environment.
But why do you take foreign money to fight against Canadian interests?
We're not fighting against Canadians.
Yes,
we're
you are.
No, that's your
yes,
definition.
You are.
And you should answer Evan's question.
This should be a Canadian process. Don't you agree that this should be a Canadian decision?
Just a second, Catherine. Let me, John Bennett. Do you think? Listen, some are saying. Do you think that only organizations that have 100% funding should be the only ones allowed to intervene on a pipeline that goes through Canada? What's your view on that?
Well, then why if the process allowed for significant intervener funding so that we could all participate in that way, then it would be a reasonable thing to suggest. But listen, we're very proud that we've cleaned up acid rain. We're very proud that we've cleaned up a lot of our lakes and systems. We're very glad that we protected a lot of forests.
Are you proud to take foreign money to fight against Canadian jobs and our economy and our interests?
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that at all. In fact, I think
you don't take foreign money? Sierra doesn't take foreign money?
Sorry, Catherine, I know that you're talking about this foreign money, but again, can you just
answer
the
question? But that's the whole point.
No,
that's
but
what this topic
why
is about.
You haven't been able to distinguish for me. Maybe I don't understand it, which is highly possible. Why do you think the oil companies, which are foreign-owned and foreign investment, they should be allowed to have their say, and groups, Canadian groups, some of which may have foreign money, why shouldn't they? I don't understand if the oil companies can do it, why can't the environmental groups?
It's a good question. Look, the companies operating in the oil sands, they pay Canadian taxes, they employ thousands of Canadians coast to coast, they're a critical part of our economy. This is about foreign interests and their puppet groups who have no stake in Canada's economy or in our decision. They're trying to manipulate and interfere in a Canadian process, and that's wrong. We shouldn't allow them to hijack a Canadian federal regulatory process. It should be Canadian voices and concerns.
Okay,
it is what's happening. It is.
It's
it
not
is
at
what's
all.
happening.
Okay.
It is.
Nobody tells the Sierra Club of Canada what to do or what to say except the members of the Sierra Club.
I'm going to ask you, Catherine Marshall, I want to add, because you keep calling these other groups puppet groups and so forth, let me ask you, because people will ask, are you a puppet group of Enbridge? So let me ask you again, does Enbridge fund you to have a campaign against these other groups? Does Enbridge give your organization money?
Look, Evan, I'm not going to respond to conspiracy theories. We're a small grassroots organization.
Why
we don't even have an office. We don't even have an office.
Let me speak.
We have hundreds of Canadian members.
No, but
our typical donor is a Canadian citizen.
If they don't give you money, sorry, just to be fair,
Canadian.
it's not a conspiracy theory. If they don't give you money, you could say they don't. If they do, fine.
I don't respond to conspiracy theories. But look, this is about foreign interests trying to hijack a Canadian process.
I can't get an answer.
People.
I don't know why that's a conspiratorial question. If Enbridge funds ethical oil, I'd love to know.
This is about foreign interests taking over Canadian decision. Let's talk about
John
that.
Bennett, I'll give you one last word here. I mean, we're talking about all things here. John Bennett?
We're talking about protecting the environment. We're talking about protecting the last intact temperate rainforest in the world. That's what this issue is about. We're talking about clean air to breathe, clean water to drink. And for decades and decades, we have participated in those debates often using some funds that have been donated from the United States.
But
It's
why?
a perfectly legal.
Why can't you rely on Canadians to pay your bills? Why do you have to rely on your foreign special interests?
Because, well, why can't you? Why can't? Why can't? I've answered the. I've answered your question. I've answered the questions. Why don't you answer Evan's questions? Who's paying you? Who's paying you to be a surrogate for the oil industry? You're not a grassroots organization. You're a surrogate.
I'm a student.
Prove it.
I do this
to answer Evan's question.
All right.
Answer Evan's question.
We didn't get an answer to if Enbridge funds ethical oil, although we got some more debate. You can see the passions around this. Catherine and Marshall, I'll give you one last chance. If you don't want to answer, that's fine. I just want to know if they do, if they don't.
But Evan, the question is about foreign interests. We're 100% Canadian. Our regular donor is an average Canadian citizen, and this is about foreign interests and puppet groups who are hijacking the process. And I think it's shocking that John was comparing our oil to heroin. That's an insult to Canadians. No wonder he has to rely on foreigners to pay his bills when he's insulting Canadians like that.
Sierra Club Executive Director John Bennett, Ethical Oil Spokesperson Catherine Marshall, spirited debate today. I appreciate both of you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.